In this video, I will be showing you how to do sample number 16, which is a cuff with elastic. So let me show you what you need to get started. So first, you're going to get a copy of this template, and you're going to need to cut it out. And on this copy, it will already have the grain, and it already has the line at the bottom that you will use as a guideline for double folding the bottom hem. And then there are some other indications. So this here says that this side is going to be on the fold of the fabric. So the fabric will be folded in half and this side will be on the fold, and I will show you that. And then over here, this is the underarm seam, because if this were a pretend sleeve, obviously it didn't start out as a tube. We had to sew it somewhere to make it a tube. And so that seam that you see right there would theoretically be starting underneath the armpit and going down the length of the sleeve. And this will be sewn at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So let me show you how to get your fabric ready. Okay, so I have already cut out my fabric, and I made sure that I aligned this pattern with the direction of the grain on the fabric, and that the fabric was also folded in half on this side. So I'll show you what I mean. So as you can see, it's folded in half right there. And this is going to be pretty common with patterns, especially like ones you'll buy at the store. They'll usually have, for certain pieces of the garment, they'll tell you a certain side needs to be on the fold. So now you know what that means. It's pretty straightforward. And then to transfer this fold line, when it was still pinned to the fabric, I just simply kind of lifted it up and drew that line so that I can just come in with a ruler really quick and finish that guideline for myself. Like that. Alright, so from this point, now you need to make sure that you have some elastic, in which it should be 0.375 inches, 3/8 of an inch braided elastic, and you'll need to cut a 5-inch piece. So just get out a ruler. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And don't stretch it when you're measuring, just let it be nice and loose. Okay, I see that it's right about there is where I'm going to cut it. Okay, now that you have cut your elastic, you have all the pieces necessary to do this. So the first step that you're going to do is you're going to do the side seam here, and you're going to again sew that at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then you're going to press that seam open. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the elastic. So ultimately you have a few options for putting in the elastic, and the point of elastic is to cinch somewhere in an outfit, so like a sleeve for accentuation, or like the bottom of sweatpants to go around your ankles, as you can kind of see in this example. So anyways, the other thing that we know is that this bottom double fold hem is going to be a 1/4 inch. So the method you might find the easiest is actually attaching this elastic before you sew the tube together. And in that case, you would need to do some measuring and marking first. So you need to leave room for the double fold hem. So you would mark 1 inch all across the bottom, because the double fold hem is 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, like that. So then after you mark that, you need to make a marking of where the elastic is going to go, and it needs to be 1.5 inches from the bottom of the double fold hem. So then you would just make a second marking on here at 1.5 inches. Okay. Okay. So this is for my hem, this is for the elastic. And then, this is where it gets tricky. The elastic has to be smaller than the tube so that when it's sewn like this, it naturally wants to scrunch back to its original size, and then that's where it ends up cinching this and gathering this fabric. So you would probably want to start on one end of this line you've drawn for yourself and put in the first pin at the top like this, and then you have to stretch it so that it fits all the way across, and then put in another pin here. So yeah, this is where it gets a little tricky, just even when it's flat, because he just wants to resist. So you can do it, add more pins, or you could simply just go take this to the machine and you could start sewing and pull the elastic as it sews down. So you could do it that way. You do run the risk that maybe you don't end up pulling it enough the entire time, and then you still might get shorted towards the end, so you have to be careful with that. But yeah, you could also do it this way, where you put it on one end and then you put it on the other end. Path of least resistance. Of course, it doesn't want to be straight when I'm trying to pin. And then from there you could hold it and get one in the middle. And then you could get another one. You could probably manage to get one here. So you would just keep doing this until you manage to get enough pins to get it held down. So that is the flat method before you sew up the tube. And in fact, you don't even need to stretch this all the way to the end, because as you know, this is going to get sewn together at a 1/2 inch seam, which I just now remembered. So it might even be just a tad bit easier knowing that you don't need to bring the elastic all the way to both ends before it's sewn. Yeah, so it feels a little easier now to do. So that's one method. The other method is doing it while you already have the tube sewn together. So in this case, again, you want to make sure you marked the bottom double fold hem, and then from there you can make your marking for where the elastic is going to go. So 1.5 inches. Like that. Okay. So in this case, you would need to start probably at least close to the seam, and I recommend, doesn't really matter under or over, but I'm just going to do under, and then I'm going to come in there, Make sure I'm only pinning this one side of the tube, not both, because I'm not trying to sew the tube together there. And then you would need to stretch it all the way around. And kind of do the same thing. And it's probably a little more tricky, because I'm still trying to keep it on that line that I drew. Yeah, now I basically have to go in here and stretch a section of it until it's flat, both the fabric and the elastic, and then throw another pin in there. Though honestly, if you just pin it at both ends, I don't quite think you would need any more pins, and let me show you why. Okay, so if you're doing the second method, you'll probably just barely be able to wiggle your fabric sleeve onto the arm here of the sewing machine, and you can see the only two pins are holding the elastic together, but I made sure to examine that the elastic is following the line that I've made, and I gotta scoot it a little more to go underneath the needle. And you would bring down the needle and then just kind of manually insert the foot. See if you can get a few stitches in there before you let the needle go. I did a little back stitching. And then you're able to sew it like this. You might need to give it a little bit of manual hand push power here. Because it's kind of on there so tight that it's not really able to move the fabric on its own as well as it might normally. I'm getting as close to the needle really as possible before I have to pull it out. Okay, back stitch there. So, basically the summary of these two techniques is technique number one is easier to set up, but it might be a little more difficult sewing. And then the second method here is the setup is a little harder, but then the sewing is easier. So you'll need to just play around with whichever method you end up liking best. Don't forget to cut all the loose strings. But now you can see the elastic is on there nicely, and you can see that on the inside too. And so from this point, I don't really think I need to go through it again, but as mentioned, this bottom hem you'll fold in half, and then you'll fold in half again to meet the line, and you're just going to want to sew as close to the folded edge on the inside here as possible, which I think ends up being inner width of the presser foot on the left toe here, aligning that edge up there. And so you do that all the way around, and then of course flip it inside out. Make sure that the elastic and the double fold hem are both on the inside with the side seam, because we want it to look nice on the outside. We don't want to see the elastic or the hem or the seam. So that is how you do a seam with elastic.